right, great to have you here with us on this Thursday morning. Boy, this week has gone awfully fast, and it's been busy. We've had some really great stories to talk about. One in particular that I happen to like is this controversy brewing at York University over religious rights of a student involving a professor who now finds himself under fire. Zach Paikin joining us this morning as our weekly. Anthony Fury also joining us to take, I guess, you on. Let's talk about this prof under fire for trying to find the balance of what he's obligated to do as a professor and what is right to do. He was talked to by a student who had religious belief. He wanted to be separated from the female students, and the professor said, no, I can't do that without offending someone else. Did he do the right thing? First word I'll give to Zach.
I think we've got a big question here as to what qualifies as religious belief and what should be accepted ultimately. Now, I happen to be a practicing Jew, and I've put forward religious requests for accommodation in the past when a test, for example, has fallen on the Sabbath or on a Jewish holiday and I couldn't write it on that day. However, in this instance, there doesn't seem to be a legitimate case, whether it's in Orthodox Judaism or in Islam, for not interacting.
We don't even know what the religion this guy practices.
So we don't particularly know in this case. So what should be accepted basically by universities or not, I think is the big question. What is a legitimate religious request?
But it seems that this professor went out of his way to accommodate. He talked to imams. He talked to those in the Orthodox Judaism faith. And he said, what do I do? And neither of them understood what was, why this needed to be accommodated the way he was. Should he be apologizing? What has he done wrong here? I don't understand it. Like, he doesn't want to offend women, and that's what he looks at doing if he accommodates this guy.
I have a business proposition. I want to pitch you guys on it. I'm thinking of opening up a store called Big Boy Pants, and it's going to be in downtown Toronto. And anybody out there who's getting all offended or finding their rights are being violated, and they're looking for opportunities everywhere, when we live in the most accommodating society in the world, the freest society in the world, where you can do whatever you want, you come down to my store if you got a little complaint, and we're going to fit you on with some big boy pants, and then you're going to go out and you're going to live in the world, and you're going to learn how to be an adult. And what's going on here, it is not the job of university or society to enumerate an exhaustive list of which religions are acceptable and what is the true Islam or the true Judaism or Orthodox Judaism. That's all a bunch of bull. At the end of the day, you have the classroom, the workplace, whatever, and someone says within reason, okay, here's what you got to do to graduate or to fill the duties of your work. And unless they're asking something completely outrageous, at the end of the day, if you have a problem with that, then you have a problem with it. And you go deal with it, which means don't take the class. Don't work in that workplace environment.
And
there's too much shenanigans going on here.
But even the student who made the request, I mean, talked to the professor, and the professor said, look, I can't accommodate you without offending women. And so the guy said, okay. He was fine with it. Who seems to have a problem with it now? I guess someone in the university who runs it went down to your Big Boy Pants store and bought little girl panties and put them on, because now they're saying, no, you still have to accommodate the religion at the cost of these women.
Simply for the purpose of intellectual consistency, let's know that there is a difference between religious accommodation, religious needs on one hand, and then on the other hand, simply being offended, right? Those are two different things. Now, I'm not here to talk about whether or not...
Yeah, but the gray, there's the gray area is broadening in that term. So sure, those two exist, but we're crossing the streams way too much these days.
We do have a right to have our religious beliefs actually maintained in a publicly funded university.
At the cost of some
However,
women?
you do not have a right not to be offended in our society. I think that that's something that we need to know.
But the student isn't offended. He said, you know what, okay, I see it from your point. You tried to accommodate without offending others. And this sociology professor actually did his own experiment and said to some female students, how would you feel and what would you do in this situation? And the women were outraged and said, well, we would file legal action. So he's caught between a rock and a hard place. I either completely accommodate the religious views of this young person at the risk of offending female students at the university. And the university is saying, no, accommodate this religious student, even though the student himself is okay. He's like fine with all this.
We're always hearing that universities need more funding. And when you look at the proportion of the student body, I remember I studied this in relation to, I think it was U of T last year. When you look at the growth in the number of the student body compared to the growth in the amount of administration has grown disproportionately. What these are is busybodies who have, I mean, this is a dean who's dealing with this issue. So you're always going to have deans, even if you have reduced them out by 50% or whatever. But there's this whole busybody antic going on with university administration where they're getting up to stuff that is not the core duty of what a dean should be doing, which is just administering student body and making sure everything runs properly. And I think this is symptomatic of that major issue. There's growth in admin. I mean, why is he wasting his time with this? And to the point, I mean, I'm saying I'm tough on people who are getting all offended and getting religious bees in their religious bonnets and so forth. But the fellow did at the end kind of shrug it off and acquiesce, which is interesting.
And you
So
have to think
he was called, called
yeah.
on it, and he thought, okay, fine. I mean, I think. I do find it strange.
He actually acknowledged that the professor was very reasonable in his arguments and said, okay, so where does it go from here? Because the university's not backing down. And I would have to think that universities around this country are watching this saying, well, what are we going to do?
Well, yeah, but who's watching what? I think the professors are watching it going, geez, is this another case of administration gone bananas? And the administrators are probably watching it from the perspective of the York administrator. I mean, you went to U of T, right?
I am currently a master's student at U of T.
I mean, at the end of the day, the main lesson here, Alex, is that Zach and I know is friends don't let friends go to York. I mean, that's the main lesson here.
This university has been in the headlines a lot. They've suffered a lot of they've had their share of headlines.
It's been well deserved.
Well, one final point with regards to what you made before, and I think it's simply important to state, I'm not a lawyer, I don't know what sort of legal action these women possibly could have taken, but I think it's dangerous once we start talking about putting human rights up for debate or up for a vote. If something is a human right, and I don't know if in this case it is necessarily a human right, but if it is a human right, then you can't have a democratic vote on whether or not it should be implemented. Human rights are absolute or can only be violated theoretically by government with the notwithstanding clause, etc. for 5 years.
What, so am I supposed to sit at the back of the classroom, and if I have my period, do I have to not even show up at the university? I think a lot
at Valley Park Middle School, yes, that's the answer.
That's another.
You can't show up.
We're not talking about that right now. That's another step altogether.
But these are issues that have faced, women being treated as secondary students and secondary people within society because someone on a radical view of religion may have
let's think about it. Is it secondary? Is it secondary? I'm going to pose an open question here, not one way or the other. Is it secondary if men and women in a university class are seated separately? Are they treated secondarily, or are men being treated being treated as secondary citizens in that instance? If we have equality of the sexes, then separation should benefit or not benefit both sexes equally.
Anthony, your
response? The whole fact that we're having this conversation right now, and this fellow was even in the mind frame where he thought it was legitimate to put this together, is very disturbing. You talk about human rights. I mean, we're in a really sad position right now where we're talking about whether or not an online student has to sit down and have a chat group with women in his class in the same label that we use to deal with genocide. Yeah. I mean, where are your priorities, people? No, you can't. No, you cannot filter this through. Yes. You're talking about a human rights issue. You're saying this is not a human rights issue. This is why I call this a big boy pants issue. This is not a human rights issue. People just have to deal with it. Not even bring it into the public square. Not even bring administration in. We are continually using police, the government, administrative bodies to deal with the fact that we have little social problems that we can't get over.
So what is the university? What's the backlash? What is the end story here for this university?
Because to stop it, just to back off,
the administration has said that they want the religious beliefs of this student accommodated. This, of course, then becomes a bigger issue for the university. What's the backlash? What's the next headline of this story?
I think that this probably goes away at this point, and then until something else like this happens.
Good fodder for talk. I mean, it's getting a lot of media attention.
They're going to have to punish someone, though, because both the student and the teacher are okay with it now. So what are they going to do? Fire the? They're going to put the prof on secondment or whatever?
I mean, that'd be crazy. He seems to have taken on a subject with a level head. He's done his research. He's accommodated to what he thinks is the best way. The religious student. He's not offended his female students, and he's got the backing of his colleagues. I think the bigger problem here is that someone at admin has had way too much drink of political correctness, and it's like they look ridiculous.
There was a great quote from this professor in the Globe and Mail piece where he said, and it's all about what we say, religious accommodation, very important, let's take that seriously. Women, we can offend women, they're probably white women, screw them. But at the end of the day, he said, what if it had been, I can't sit with blacks in a classroom? We would not accept that, and that student, it is the same thing. It is exactly. You're taking a group. You're saying I can't be with a group.
You're not
that is completely the same thing.
1 second. We do have men and women when it comes to washrooms. We separate them then. If we had white and black washrooms, of course, it'd be
studying and urinating are not the same thing. Let's get that out there.
They are coming around with universal washrooms now for men, women, transgender people, because we're also worried about being offended. Hey, you know what? It is the same.
Those exist, but do those exist throughout society? Are we going to be in a society where there's no division?
And blacks go through the side door? I mean, really?
I think that it's fair to say, not legally, but just objectively, not legally, but there is a difference between men and women. They're not the same. They're equal before the law, but they are different.
Right,
I think it would be wrong
for a study group, though.
But I
For
think,
a study
I think
group?
it would be wrong
For
to
a
say.
long time, women and those of different ethnicity, blacks, for instance, were treated as secondary. And it wasn't all that long ago if you look back in history. So the university professor brings up a good argument there. And I have to say, I don't think the conversation's over. I think the university might be in a bit of trouble.
We're not talking about the back of the bus here. We're talking about one person necessarily or not necessarily interacting with people.
Women are being pushed to the back of the metaphoric bus in classrooms in the GTA
And I'll tell you,
right now.
I'll tell you,
that is happening.
I will tell you why I don't think that this story is going to be going anywhere, to be honest with you. It's probably going to be like the Saskatoon story you heard about the guy who got offended that it said Merry Christmas on one of the buses. It's not going anywhere, because when it comes to reasonable accommodation in our society, the general consensus, more or less, is that you accommodate the needs of whatever minority it is, so long as it does not cause serious harm to anybody.
Well,
offense, that's one thing, but harm is another story, and here I don't think that there's any harm.
But if we let it happen once, and Anthony is very correct, we already have schools within the Toronto District School Board allowing moms to come in
How
and
did
put
it harm
women...
blacks by them having to go in the side door? How does it harm women by not letting them? No,
it's not the same thing.
It is exactly. Once you start saying nobody's harmed, of course, yes, they are going through this.
No
he's
one's going
saying
through the side door.
He's saying I can't study with women.
So he's not going to be there, and the women will still be there.
Fight. Well, yeah, but what if he starts to outnumber the women? What if there's a classroom where there's more of his type than the women? Then the women are going to have to go in the side door.
It is a precedent-setting case in the sense that you are basically saying if you allow this to happen, then it's okay for someone else to come back with their religious views and say, well, if we're going to do this to women, hey, I don't want to sit beside that ethnicity over there because that's against my religion.
We're in the age of post-equality. We're in inequality now. We've gone back to being in inequality in these stories. I think it's a shame.
It is a shame. I had a whole second
it's a shame.
topic, and we can't even get to it because you guys managed to burn through the time on this one. But it is obviously it's a talker. And
those gender bathrooms, I knew once Ally McBeal got on the air, that would be it. Society would be screwed. Remember that? They had that bathroom.
Indeed, I do. We're not laughing now, though. Guys, thanks very much. Zach Pagan and Anthony Fury. Obviously, this is a topic that people are discussing. It's a great debate topic.